Have you ever wondered why some people seem happier and healthier once they're on their own in their later years? Could it be that freedom, peace, and personal space matter more than constant companionship after 70? And what if being single at this stage of life isn't a loss, but actually a hidden gift waiting to be unwrapped? Many relationships, over time, can start to feel less like blessings and more like obligations. If you're in your 70s or beyond, chances are you've spent decades putting others first, raising children, supporting a spouse, managing a household, and being the dependable one everyone relied on. But now you might find yourself quietly asking, what would life look like if you had more peace, more breathing room, and finally, more time just for you? This conversation isn't about loneliness, and it's certainly not about giving up on love or companionship. It's about something far deeper. For countless people after 70, the surprising truth is that being single can bring greater freedom, improved health, and a level of happiness that a strained or unbalanced relationship simply cannot provide. Isn't it worth considering that stepping away from emotional weight could open the door to a lighter, more fulfilling life? In this video, you'll discover 7 powerful reasons why being single after 70 might not only be okay, but better than you ever imagined. Whether you are divorced, widowed, or simply choosing to live solo, this message is for you. Together, we'll explore how this stage of life can transform into a season of expansion rather than limitation, a time of emotional clarity, restored energy, and quiet joy that comes from living on your own terms. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll hear today might help you see your own life in a way you've never considered before. So let's dive right in. The first reason is emotional exhaustion that comes from decades of compromise. By the time you reach your 70s, most people have already spent 40 or even 50 years adjusting to someone else's habits, moods, needs, and decisions. Even in what we would call a healthy relationship, that kind of constant compromise takes a toll. It isn't about blaming your partner or pointing fingers. It's about acknowledging that the emotional energy you once had for endless negotiation or people-pleasing may simply be worn thin. The little things you used to brush aside, a raised voice, a dismissive comment, or giving up your preferences to keep the peace, can suddenly feel heavier, more draining, almost like weights you no longer have the strength to carry. After 70, many people discover they don't have the same emotional cushion they once relied on to absorb those daily frictions. And here's the striking difference. When you're no longer in a relationship that demands constant adjustment, that daily tension begins to vanish. There's a lightness in being able to decide for yourself what you eat, when you go to bed, what shows you watch, and how you live, without always bending to someone else's expectations. This isn't about being selfish. It's about a much-needed psychological recovery. Take Ruth, for example, a 74-year-old woman who spent 52 years married, always managing her life around her husband's strong opinions. When he passed away, she suddenly realized she was making her own choices for the first time in decades. She said, "I never realized how much I gave up until I stopped giving it." That quiet sense of liberation, of no longer having to bend every single day, is something many single seniors describe, not with sadness, but with genuine relief. It doesn't mean they are bitter. It means they've finally learned to recognize their own boundaries and respect their emotional capacity. After 70, this kind of clarity becomes a lifeline. And when you begin to prioritize your peace over years of people-pleasing, something inside of you shifts. Your nervous system finally calms, and life starts to feel lighter. You start sleeping better. You even catch yourself smiling more without really knowing why. Often, it's because for the first time in years, you're finally living on your own terms. And at this stage of life, that might just be the greatest gift you can give yourself. Reason 2, daily friction becomes more irritating than comforting. As we age, something subtle but powerful happens. We become far more sensitive to tension, even in the smallest amounts. What once felt like harmless, playful bickering in your 40s can feel more like sandpaper rubbing against your nerves in your 70s. The little quirks that used to add character to your relationship, like the way they loaded the dishwasher wrong, or their habit of dozing off during your favorite movie, no longer seem amusing. Instead, they grate on you in ways that feel personal rather than playful. The reason is simple. As you grow older, your threshold for stress shrinks. Your nervous system doesn't bounce back from emotional jolts the way it once did. You crave peace, not constant noise. You long for simplicity, not endless adjustments. Even the smallest things, a sharp tone of voice, a drawn-out sigh from across the room, can start to feel like unwanted pressure pressing down on your chest. It's not that your partner has changed dramatically, it's that your body, your mind, and your emotional reserves have shifted. And with those changes, even tiny interactions can begin to feel like power struggles you never asked to fight. That's why for many people, after 70, being alone doesn't feel lonely. It feels safe. Take Frank, for instance, who is now 76. After his divorce at 68, he was stunned by the silence in his home. At first, the quiet felt unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. But gradually, he realized that silence was exactly what he needed. He said, "I used to think I needed someone to talk to all day, but it turns out I needed someone not to argue with all day." And Frank is not the only one. He's part of a much larger pattern. Research consistently shows that older adults report higher satisfaction with solitude than younger people. Why is that? Because they've already lived through the noise, the conflicts, the endless caretaking, and the daily chaos. For them, quiet is no longer empty, it's healing. They've come to understand that silence isn't empty at all. It's full of recovery. So if you find yourself tiptoeing around your spouse more often than you're walking beside them with joy, that's not a personal failure. Instead, it may be a quiet message from your spirit saying, "I'm tired of negotiating peace. I just want to live in it." If you're still with me and finding these insights meaningful, I'd love for you to drop the number 2 in the comments to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future videos. Your support makes it possible for us to keep sharing valuable content that informs, encourages, and inspires. Now, let's continue. Reason 3. Caregiving burdens tip the emotional scale. By the time you reach your 70s, it's likely that one of you isn't as strong as before, physically, emotionally, or perhaps both. That is simply part of the natural course of aging. But what people rarely talk about is how the role of caregiver, even when offered with love and devotion, slowly changes the balance between two people. What once felt like a true partnership can gradually start to feel more like a responsibility. And when that responsibility isn't shared equally, it has a way of building quiet, unspoken resentment. Take Martha and Bill, for example. They've been married for 49 years. When Bill's memory began to fade, Martha stepped in without hesitation. She organized his medications, repeated the same reminders for appointments, and took over the endless flow of paperwork. But 6 months into her new role, Martha found herself sighing before almost every task. It wasn't because she stopped loving Bill. It was because she missed being simply his wife, not his nurse, scheduler, and constant safety net. That subtle shift, when your spouse becomes someone you manage instead of someone you lean on, creates a kind of emotional fatigue. And unlike in younger years, you simply don't have the same reserves of energy to bounce back from that fatigue. You begin to ask yourself quietly, when do I get a break? And when the answer is always never, that question plants the seed of hidden bitterness. The resentment isn't necessarily directed at your spouse. More often, it's about the helplessness of the situation itself. You watch their decline, and at the same time, you're not just seeing them lose strength, you're also watching your own freedom fade away with theirs. The guilt of feeling that resentment can weigh heavily, but your body doesn't lie. You're tired, worn thin. Every time you get up to handle one more responsibility, you're also grieving, in silence, the version of your life that no longer exists. Love hasn't disappeared, but the weight of endless roles, expectations, and exhaustion can blur the joy that once tied you together. And that's why, for some people, being single, free from guilt and the constant pressure of caregiving, begins to look less like loneliness and more like relief, even if it carries a shade of sadness. It's also the reason some older adults quietly choose separation, not out of anger or rejection, but out of self-preservation. Because sometimes love doesn't mean holding on tighter. Sometimes it means stepping back and saying, I still care deeply, but I need to breathe again. Reason 4. The erosion of curiosity and shared novelty. One of the most powerful forces that keeps a relationship alive at any age is curiosity, not only about each other, but about life itself, about new places, new hobbies, new adventures. Yet after 70, particularly in long-term marriages, that shared spark of wonder often begins to dry up. You wake up to the same chairs, have the same conversations about the same aches, eat the same meals, and before long, the days begin to blur into one another. It's not because either person has become boring or bad. It's simply because neither of you is bringing anything new into the mix. And over time, the stillness that once felt comforting slowly starts to feel stale. The truth is, curiosity is a form of energy. It's engagement with life. It's the spark that says, let's go try this, or, did you read that? Without it, even the smallest conversations begin to feel like chores rather than connections. You ask, what do you want for dinner? And hear the same answer you've heard 100 times before. You suggest going out, and the reply is, maybe next week. The silence between you is no longer filled with ease or familiarity. Instead, it's filled with quiet disinterest. Many older adults don't even realize it's happening. They assume this is just what marriage looks like after so many years. But that quiet resignation is exactly what builds inner tension. Because one of you might still crave adventure, growth, or surprise, while the other has settled into monotony. That mismatch doesn't just create distance, it can grow into resentment, not only toward your partner, but also toward the version of yourself you feel you've lost. You begin to wonder, when did I stop growing? Or even worse, why am I shrinking just to match their pace? Betty, age 74, explained it in her own words. I still wanted to learn Italian. My husband just wanted to rewatch the same old TV shows. I realized we weren't curious about the same things anymore, and that made me feel alone, even though I wasn't technically alone. This is why so many people after 70 feel freer once they're single. It's not about disliking their spouse. It's about rediscovering the ability to say yes to life again. It's about waking up and feeling like the world is still opening, not closing in. For some, that quiet freedom is more fulfilling than staying in a stagnant companionship. If you're still watching and finding these insights meaningful, please type the number 4 in the comments to let me know you're here. Your interaction helps me see that these messages are reaching you, and it encourages me to keep creating content that speaks to your journey. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. Your support allows us to keep creating content that informs, uplifts, and inspires. Now, let's move forward. Reason 5. Unspoken emotional debts. As couples grow older, it's not unusual for old emotional wounds to remain unhealed. Not because either person is unkind or cruel, but simply because life kept moving forward. Most of us chose harmony over confrontation, telling ourselves it was easier to let things slide. But here's the truth. What isn't talked about doesn't disappear. It doesn't evaporate with time. Instead, it settles deeper. Maybe your spouse dismissed your career years ago. Maybe you gave more support to their family than they ever offered to yours. Maybe you carried the heavy weight of caregiving, sacrifices, or even betrayals, quietly convincing yourself it was fine, that it was too long ago to matter. The reality is, those emotional debts, those silent you owe me's, don't vanish with age. By the time you're in your 70s, they often harden. With fewer distractions and more time to reflect, those buried hurts resurface, quietly fueling resentment. You begin to notice how one-sided the relationship feels. You remember the gratitude that never came, the apology that was never made. And even if everything looks calm on the outside, inside you may find yourself keeping score. In older couples, resentment often isn't explosive. It's not loud arguments or slammed doors. It's subtle and slow, a quiet pulling away, a reluctance to share, a polite distance that masks emotional disconnection. You may still cook dinner, still go for walks, still say goodnight, but deep down, something soft has gone missing. The kindness feels more mechanical, the love more functional. Psychologists refer to this as emotional bookkeeping. Over decades, you begin to keep a mental ledger of disappointments, small and large. And by 70, that ledger can feel full to the brim. Without release, without honest conversation or acknowledgement, those old entries begin to sour even the smallest interactions. Harold, at 78, put it this way: I spent 35 years putting her needs first. I didn't complain, Harold admitted. But now when I see her act like I owe her even more, something inside me just clenches. I realize I've been swallowing my feelings for decades, and I'm tired of it. This is why resentment in later years can catch even the most stable couples by surprise. What was once buried in the name of harmony begins to rise to the surface in the quiet of retirement. And unless it is addressed openly, it can slowly poison the time you have left together. Not through shouting matches, but through a quiet sadness that lingers in the air. Reason 6. A shift in identity and purpose. When we're younger, so much of who we are is tied to what we do. Our careers, our roles as parents, as providers, as problem solvers. But after 70, those outer layers start to peel away. Retirement, children moving out, and changes in health often leave us staring at a quieter version of life, one that forces a deep and sometimes unsettling question. Who am I now? That question lands differently for men and women, but it unsettles both. Some people rediscover joy in hobbies, old friendships, or spiritual pursuits. Others feel adrift, like passengers riding along in someone else's life. And when you're living with a partner who is adjusting at a different pace, or heading in a completely different direction, that gap can easily turn into friction. Maybe you've found peace in gardening, in reading, or in simple routines, while your spouse is restless, eager to travel, spend, or chase new distractions. Or perhaps it's the opposite. You're the one trying to reinvent your purpose, while your partner has already settled into the comfort of television reruns and predictable habits. What happens next is rarely loud or dramatic. Instead, it's subtle. You begin to judge each other quietly, not always in words, but through sighs, silences, and a growing sense that you no longer understand each other the way you once did. You begin to wonder how it's possible to have lived with this person for decades and yet feel so emotionally distant now. You still eat meals together, but the warmth has faded. You sit beside each other, yet your minds seem to drift to completely different places. Psychologists call this identity drift. It isn't about falling out of love. It's about two people evolving into different versions of themselves at different speeds and failing to recognize each other along the way. This is often where resentment starts to creep in. You begin to feel misunderstood. You're trying to grow, to adapt, to redefine your place in this new stage of life, but your partner either doesn't notice or doesn't seem to care. Eleanor, at 74, shared her experience. After I retired, I started painting again. It gave me a joy I hadn't felt in years, but every time I showed my husband a new piece, he barely looked up. She went on to explain, "That's when I realized I wasn't looking for praise. I was looking for him to see me again. But he couldn't, or maybe he just wouldn't." And the truth is, it's not always intentional neglect. Sometimes your spouse is quietly wrestling with their own struggles, and neither of you knows how to speak about it. But over time, that silence grows heavier. What once was empathy slowly turns into emptiness, and disconnection begins to feel like neglect. Resentment quietly fills the space where compassion used to live. If you're still here watching and finding these insights meaningful, please comment the number 6 below to let me know you're with me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, take a moment to do so and turn on the bell. That way, you won't miss future videos. Your support helps us continue creating thoughtful content to inform, guide, and inspire you. Now, let's continue. Reason 7. The lack of appreciation for invisible efforts. By the time you reach your 70s or 80s, there's a long list of little things you do for one another that no one notices anymore. Perhaps you're the one quietly refilling the pillbox each week, or making sure the thermostat is set just right. Maybe you're the one who remembers birthdays, keeps prescriptions filled, or gently reminds them to eat a bit more, rest a little longer, or take that short walk outside. These may not be grand gestures, but they're the unseen threads holding daily life together. They're the quiet, repeated acts of care that hold daily life together. But here's the difficult truth. Over time, these gestures shift from being appreciated to being expected. And when something becomes expected, it often slips into the background, unnoticed. You may not even realize how much this wears on you until one ordinary moment, when you're standing at the kitchen sink or folding laundry, and suddenly you feel it, a sting. That small voice inside whispers, "Would they even notice if I stopped?" And this is the emotional fatigue that builds when love is no longer acknowledged, when caregiving feels more like a duty than a bond of affection. And when you bring it up, the response might be, "Well, I didn't ask you to do all that." That answer cuts deep, because you didn't do those things for recognition, you did them out of love. But even love, over time, needs air to breathe. Resentment doesn't always come from dramatic betrayals. More often, it grows out of these small omissions, the gratitude left unspoken, the efforts left unseen, the missing "thank you." Slowly, you begin to feel less like a spouse and more like unpaid staff. And in your quiet moments, you ask yourself, when did I become invisible? Harold, now 81, put it into words. My wife used to thank me every time I fixed something around the house. Now it's like I'm just supposed to. One day, he stopped fixing things altogether just to see if she would notice. That's the danger. When appreciation fades, love turns into labor, and labor without thanks always leaves a bruise. Final thoughts. What begins as love and excitement in our younger years often becomes routine in our later ones. And if we're not careful, that routine can harden into resentment, not because of hatred, but because of years of small disappointments, unmet emotional needs, and feelings left unspoken. If you've seen even a glimpse of your own story in what we've shared today, know this: you are not alone. These feelings don't mean love has disappeared. They simply mean your heart is asking to be seen, heard, and valued again. They mean that deep inside, a part of you still longs to be seen, to be heard, and to be truly cared for. And that, in many ways, is the hidden beauty of aging. Yes, it brings challenges, but it also brings remarkable clarity. You begin to recognize what no longer serves you, and you slowly find the courage to finally speak it aloud. Whether you've been married for 50 years or simply sharing a home where the emotional distance has grown, it's never too late to shift the energy between you. Healing doesn't always come from grand gestures. It begins with the small things. A word of acknowledgement, an honest conversation, a willingness to let go of outdated roles and step into new ones together. That is where change takes root. Even at 70, even at 80, it's possible to bring new life into old connections. And if you've ever felt like your partner doesn't understand you anymore, perhaps it's time to gently guide them to see the parts of you that have changed too. After all, relationships aren't meant to stay frozen. They are meant to grow as we grow. Thank you for spending your time with us today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share one thing that stood out to you, or one way you hope to apply these insights in your own life. Your voice matters, and your comments bring us both encouragement and inspiration. If you found value in this video, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that informs, uplifts, and inspires. Wishing you good health, happiness, and peace always. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so we can continue this journey together.